Welcome to the latest episode of Lean In Leander. I'm your host, Andrew Naudine, and I recently had the pleasure of sitting down for a long conversation with the new city manager here in Leander, Texas. Todd Parton started his job here in April, and he's taking to the task quite readily, I would say. I had a very enjoyable conversation with him, so much so that we went a little bit over our allotted time, and so for you, I have split the episode into two parts. So this will be part one of my conversation with Todd Parton. Hey everybody, we're here at Lantern Media Studios again for the latest episode of Lean In Leander, which I am very, very pleased and kind of giddy to have an opportunity to speak with the new city manager, Mr. Todd Parton. Todd, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good morning.
I appreciate you making this happen because I know you got lots of stuff going on, so I definitely appreciate the courtesy. Todd is the new city manager, as I mentioned, and this was a process that we've covered on the podcast. We kind of touched on some of the hiring process. If you go back a few episodes, you'll be able to find that information while the process was ongoing. So back in March of 2024, that process was completed. And Todd was the survivor, I guess, right? There was 71 applications that the city reviewed, and they were from 19 different states. So it was a pretty comprehensive process and exercise, which, again, I think at the time that we did those episodes, I laud the city for taking that extra effort and that extra time. I think it was a very, very well-coordinated and well-executed search. And then Todd is the one, like I said, who ended up surviving that whole process. But he's got some really, really great bona fides. And I want to start there, just kind of chat a little bit about you, your personal history. I know that you were a graduate of the University of North Texas. So are you a Texas native or not?
I am.
You are?
I was born and raised in Denton.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Went to University of North Texas, bachelor's and master's program.
Excellent.
And then went out in the world. Went to go explore California for about 7.5 years and had to come back home.
Right. Well, good. I didn't realize that you were actually a Texas native. That's good to know. I'm sure a lot of people would be really happy with that.
My y'all is really native.
Your all is native. Right?
Yes.
That's good. That's good. So, so were you at North Texas? Because I remember North Texas at a point it had a moniker name change, if I remember correctly, right? I can't remember what the old university was, but I mean, I'm giving my age away by that.
We were NTSU.
That's what it was.
And we became the University of North Texas.
I remember that.
Emphasis on the. Yeah,
the
University of North Texas.
And it's the Eagles, right? Mean Green. Right.
Exactly.
So I noticed that, and I was like, all right, so if you are naturally inclined to be green, Austin FC fan?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, when we were living in Redlands, we actually went to L.A. and saw LAFC and Austin play in the Western Conference Championships.
Oh, wow. That was a good game to watch.
It was. Well, lost 3-0.
Well, I mean, but still, it was a good game.
But we were wearing our Verde.
Were you wearing the Verde?
Absolutely.
All right. See, now, I have to cop here that Forever Orange. I'm from Houston, so the Dynamo, my heart beats there, right? But it's fun to have the teams like that. I mean, I love going to the games here in Austin. I think the venue is absolutely fantastic. And, I kind of figured you might be inclined to be Verde.
Well, and actually when I was in Cibolo, we had a Major League Soccer preseason tournament. And Greg Kinnear and Houston Dynamo were actually probably the primary team that came to play in that event.
Really?
And actually, I think they won that event that summer.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that's neat. That's interesting. I kind of pegged you as maybe a footy guy, but, I kind of wanted to slip that one in there.
I appreciate that.
All right. Excellent. All right. So personal, like married, kids?
Yeah. So we have been married since 1997.
Okay.
So I'm very fortunate. So Mandy is my bride. So,
okay. Did you meet at uni?
Actually, I had already graduated, and we were set up on a blind date.
Oh,
So
really?
she was just finishing up there.
Oh, okay.
So I got lucky.
Yeah,
You know,
you did.
pretty much. But they lied. She could see perfectly well.
Oh,
So
okay.
it
Yeah,
was kind of
bad
crazy.
joke, bad dad joke. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming you have kids because that was a bad dad joke.
Yeah. So our son is 20, just graduated. So he's working on his next chapter.
Right.
And then our daughter is a senior in high school.
Okay.
So wife and daughter are finishing up in Redlands. So
Okay.
they're out in California for the
Just-
next 10 months.
And then that's senior year for her, right?
It is.
All right. I'm assuming you probably make a couple of jaunts out there. Senior year's a lot of stuff going on. You don't want to miss anything.
It
right?
is. Yeah. I think in a couple weeks, I need to take a quick little weekend trip out to go
Well,
do.
Good for you. Good for
swim.
you. That's always the. You're almost an empty nester, and I've already been an empty nester for a few years now. So it moves really, really quick, right? But I know that the senior year is like just that's super, super important that time. So it's got to be a little bit of a challenge. I mean, taking this type of position out here, knowing that you're not going to be there every day. So,
It is. And, part of the, I guess, advantage, if you will, to the situation is that right now, coming into a job like this new, there's so many hours, you could work every day for many, many hours. So it gives me a chance to kind of concentrate and drill in and let them do what they need to do. But, they'll be up for holidays. Came in for the home closing for a couple of days. I'll go out there for a few trips and, we'll make it work.
nice.
We talk every day.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's different now. I mean, Zoom or whatever, FaceTime, whatever. There's easier. It's not as challenging as it was even before my time. I mean, my kids had Zoom. It was not that big of a deal. I could see
Right.
them in college too.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, kudos for that because that is a difficult decision to make, but obviously something that you felt was I would assume, I'm not put words in your mouth, but it was the right thing to do, right? Because
It was, and she's very active, in high school, on sports and extracurricular activities and good friend base. So it's like let's
leave that.
let's
alone.
support that
Yeah,
and let you
yeah.
finish up.
So a little bit of an idea there of strong decision making on your part there, Todd. All right. Anyway, okay. Well, thank you for sharing that because again, my audience is a little bit more a casual audience from that perspective, and it's not necessarily the hard-boiled, civic-minded people. It's more of a diverse group of folks that I think watch the podcast and listen in. So I want to give them a little bit of an idea of who you are, and I think that helps people understand. Especially because there's not a whole lot of discussion, generally speaking, in my experience here in Leander, and like I said, I've been here about 6 years. There really was always like, well, who's the city manager and what do they do? That kind of conversation, you hear it all the time, right? And that was part of my effort here was to get you, and again, I appreciate you making the time, so that we can kind of start to break down some of that thought process, right? Just like,
Right.
Hey, Todd's just a guy and he has a job, right? And he is here because he has an intent to help with, that's why you take the job, right? It's not because,
Right.
it's just, I want to be there. You have to want to be there, right? And obviously, leaving your family in California for about 10 months to a year, that's a big decision. So I think that definitely shows an intent there. So I want to highlight that a little bit. My words, not his. Okay. All right. So what drove you into this space? Like, tell me from your perspective, because I've got some notes here about what a city manager does, but from your perspective, like in your own words, what would you say you do?
Well, I got into public service because I wanted to help build communities, and I wanted to try to make as much of an impact into the world and into communities and lives as much as I could. And, from really even middle school, I talked to my mom a lot about what was going to look like. She was, oh, you should be an engineer. You need to be an engineer. So I don't really know if I like math that much. I mean, I could do math, but I don't know if I really like it, And so, so I always had kind of a mentality of wanting to serve and give back and try to contribute as much as I could. So, so I was kind of looking at that. When I started working on my bachelor's degree at North Texas, I really started in journalism. And because I thought that was a great way to be able to try to help inform people and kind of serve that mission. And one of the things you do at North Texas is you work on the campus newspaper. I did an interview for a new program, which was the Emergency Administration and Planning Program. And I was so enthralled by that program and what I learned about it. I said, that is an angle. That is truly a way to get in and get involved. And so I switched my major to Emergency Administration and Planning. And we learned a lot about policy, about governance, about all those different things you have to know from that perspective. And then when I graduated, I realized I needed to go back and work on my master's program. So I went to I pursued a master's in public administration. In the meantime, I took a position as a planning tech with the city of Denton. Because I needed
some experience.
I needed experience. Planning was fantastic. It brought in a lot of what I had learned through the through the EADP program at North Texas. It just was a good fit. And it's just been amazing from then on because I got into planning and got to be there at the very, very, I guess, bottom of an organization. So, I've worked from the very, lowest level positions, all the way through, that process.
And Denton was a kind of burgeoning city at that particular point in time. I mean, it was definitely in a growth mode, if I remember correctly. And, I'm just going from exposure to the university and stuff like that. I remember my dad lived in Denton for a little bit, right?
Okay.
Because his wife, my stepmom, was doing her undergraduate work at Texas Women's, I think is right.
TW?
Women's? Yeah. So
That's
she
right.
was there doing her undergraduate work, and he had moved to Denton to kind of support that process, right? So he was there for a few years, and I remember it. I remember seeing Denton when it was smaller, and then when I went to see him, and we even talked about having my daughter look at Texas Women's because I was like, seems like a good university. You should probably check it out. She didn't want to stay in Texas, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But so it's interesting. Yeah. So you were there kind of, was it an intern type situation or was it a paid position?
So I had finished up my bachelor's. I had done an internship actually at the city of Grand Prairie in the emergency management office. And so emergency manager at that time was a man named George Grant. It was amazing. And he mentored me, and we actually were writing emergency response plans. And it was kind of cool because we'd write, and then he would take it to the council. They'd get it adopted. I was like, woo.
Right,
it was all exciting. And so, and then again, I knew I needed to go pursue the master's degree. So I actually had applied for a position at the city of Dallas in water utilities, and at the city of Denton in a planning tech position. I actually was offered the water utilities position in Dallas. And, it actually paid a little bit more. But I said, I'm right there in Denton. I'm there. It just kind of made sense.
Right.
And so it was really, in retrospect, probably the best decision I could have made. It's been just amazing.
No, that's excellent. You also did, just again, while you were doing your master's, you had an emphasis on budget and finance. Correct. So I kind of wanted to use that to leverage into like the first question, right? So now we've talked a little bit about you. When we look at, public budgets and public finance, one of the challenges I would imagine, and I'm just going from my perspective, right? I like to think of it as at least an informed perspective, but I could be wrong, right? So one of the challenges, it seems to me, is balancing public safety, sustainability, and then in a city like Leander, which is experiencing the type of growth, which has to be mind-boggling, right? I mean, because I know that in Beaumont, in California, where you were, it was about a population of about 45,000, right? Yeah, is that right? Yes. So here we're closer to 100. So it's like double the population base, right? And by the way, Beaumont is near Palm Springs, so you're dealing with a lot of the same types of issues, right? The water and resources and conservation and things of that nature. So I found it to be very interesting when I read that information. I was like, wow, that was hopefully purposeful in looking for somebody who had those similar types of experiences. But How is it that, again, when you're looking at the budget and the financial piece of this, right? The city manager it's like the CEO, right? That you're the chief executive of operations, right? So it comes to the functioning of the city. Council obviously sets budgets. They decide where money is supposed to be spent, but you're the one who's actually like, you have to execute on that, right? And I'm wondering from that perspective, what is your thought now that you've had a little bit of time here? Because I think April was, so you've had a little bit of time to get your feet wet, right? Um, how is it that we can continue to foster economic development while maintaining some of those, pillars, if you will, like public safety, sustainability, and housing? Those are key factors into that economic development, right? What's the balance there? How do we go about doing that and doing it with intent?
Well, the first thing you really have to do is to understand where you are today. So, and you have to be just brutally honest about that, the good, the bad. So there's a lot of good here, and which is why I came. It's just a lot of opportunity to be able to marshal the resources that are here. The way I explain it to some people is the city of Leander's kind of in kind of a golden era, so to speak, from that financial perspective, where revenues have been growing significantly, but the demands on the city and the expectations of the citizens are also growing at the same time. So strategically, we have to make sure that we are smartly using our resources and we're putting those into the areas where we need to prioritize and make those most effectively deployed. So what the first step in the process is really to begin to look at where we expect to be over an extended period of time. So we're working right now to develop some long-range fiscal forecasting. So what do we think we're going to have to work with from a financial perspective over the next 15, 20, 25 years? Because when we look to develop programs, whether it's adding people, adding equipment, doing additional things, are those sustainable within a 5 to 10 year window? And we want to establish performance expectations for those programs. So we'll be developing that process as well. So if we're spending money to do a specific program and we're expecting to achieve specific results, are we receiving those results? If we're not, then what's the failure? Are we under-resourced? What's happening in that process? So it's a constant evaluation process. I really kind of started working on this kind of strategy that I have when I was in Cibolo. Fast-growing city, we were doing up to 2,000 new homes a year when I was there. Major commercial retail growth happening, all those kind of things were going on. First city manager, they had just converted to a home rule city. So we were building a lot of financial structure, brand new CIP, all those different things. When I went from there to Kerrville was an established city, slower growth, recession of 2008 hit. Mm-hmm. So we had to go back and totally reinvent the city's finances. And we had to re-examine what we were doing. We had to match our resources to the delivery services or service levels that we were trying to deliver at that time. And I'm proud to say we were able to work through that situation. We made cuts. We kept service levels at a level that I don't think the citizens ever really saw a change.
Right.
What they saw at the end result was a consistent level of service. Right. So those experiences in developing those programs were what was really kind of what took me to Beaumont, California. Mm-hmm. Beaumont, California was a city that was fast growing. It's actually 53,000 when I left, but we were adding probably about 800 or 900 new homes a year at that stage. But they were sliding into bankruptcy when I got there.
Right.
So we restructured the city's finances. It was literally building from ground zero up. So all those situations make a Leander situation, this is the pot at the end of the rainbow, so to speak.
Right, because I would imagine that again, you've touched on it. Thank you, because I didn't have to bring it up. Uh, you've touched on some of the challenges in the prior engagements that you've had with other cities, right? And the bankruptcy out there in Beaumont definitely was something that I wanted to kind of touch on a little bit, because from a financial perspective, that's a huge challenge, right?
Yes.
Any kind of bankruptcy, I mean, it's just that's again, like you said it, I can't say it any better. You really have to start with ground zero. You have to build it from the bottom up, right? And fortunately, we're not having those similar challenges here, which is great. But you're able to take all of that knowledge base that you've been developing over all these years and apply that here at Leander, which has got to be helpful to process from your perspective, right? Because you're not kind of trying to figure it out as you're going. You're like, oh, okay, I've already had these experiences, right? We can apply this type of experience here. And that usually ends up creating some level of change as well, right? So from a change management perspective, what's your general philosophy? Because I don't want to put you on the spot, right? Because that can be a little bit of a loaded question. But there is an inevitable nature to someone coming into a position and taking charge that there will be change, right? It's an expectation. I know anytime I go into any of my jobs, I've been like, I'm the new guy here. I'm expecting to change a few things, right? Or at least if I get a new boss, I'm expecting him to make some changes. It's just an expectation. And I think a lot of times that's lost on the citizenry because there is still a little bit here in Leander, and again, these are my words, not yours. There's still a little bit of a backwards looking kind of like, almost mythos that has developed of what Leander had been, right? Because you're going from rural to suburban, urban kind of space, right? And the growth has been, as I mentioned, and I've talked about it a million times, it was exponential. That just does not happen on the norm, right? That was crazy, and still is crazy growth. And it's good on a number of areas, but then there's challenges, right? So when you're looking at that and you're looking at an established city structure, which you're coming into, there's bound to be change. So in a general sense, again, I don't want to pin you down on anything. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I want to get your thoughts on that. Like how do you approach that? How do you approach that change management process?
Well, the first is conversations with council. What is it that they are expecting the organization to really deliver? And what does that philosophy need to look like? And so, council's been very clear on specific points of concern that they have and some expectations that they have. They've also been very clear that they really like our core staff, and there's a good set of staff here that's ready to go. So, so part of that is taking that information and communicating that back to the staff. Okay, this is what the concerns are, and we don't take it personally.
Right.
These are observations,
Right.
and some of these things that council hears, they're coming from things that they're hearing from constituents. They're hearing from the business community, and so that's feedback. So they may not talk to us directly; they may talk to a council person, but we're getting the feedback. So let's take that as constructive criticism, and we can absorb that as part of what we need to contemplate. So we talked to council, we're taking that input, but the other thing is really to begin to talk about the fact that we're not Leander at 90,000 people. We are Leander that is a city that's building towards 200,000 people potentially. And so we are building forward. We have to look forward. And we have to do that. And like I said earlier, if we're honest about where we are now, we're looking forward into where we're going in the directions that we're going and we need to go. Then as from a cultural perspective, how do we help then facilitate that process? How do we help council? How do we help our boards and commissions? How do we help our citizens? How do we help our business community begin to move into that direction? And so that's kind of the cultural expectation within the organization that we're trying to create.
So I know, again, I'm going to look back a little bit at your experience, because I know that in Beaumont, wastewater management master plan was something that you worked on. The road maintenance, and I think there was a big road project in Beaumont that was under your guide while you were there. There are similar structural, infrastructural issues here in Leander specifically that you can't avoid having at least a little bit of a mention of the water situation and what's going on with that. And then if you talk to the citizenry, and I'm a citizen, so in my opinion, I'm like, we need to do something about the roads. I mean, we continue to grow, but the growth is outpacing our ability to maintain the infrastructure, right? And so that's going to be a quality of life issue downstream for anyone who's living in some of these subdivisions. And there's arguments about, our over-reliance on developers and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into that necessarily, right? But that's the type of feedback that we hear consistently, right? But you've had some experience with that. You've had some experience with issues similar to that. So knowing that those are challenges here in Leander, how do you address that? Would you consider those to be the most pressing challenges here in the city right now, or is there something else that we maybe as a general, the citizens in general, we don't necessarily think about? I don't know. Like, I'll use it. I know it's not an issue, but like, let's say fire, like the fire department, right? You don't think about those things, generally speaking, as a citizen until, there's something burning, right? Mm-hmm. So that's again, I want to kind of understand from your perspective, if having stepped in now and had an opportunity to kind of take a look at the lay of the land, what would you say are the most pressing challenges here in Leander from that perspective?
Well, definitely, public safety, parks and recreation, core infrastructure. Those are three elements that really, really need attention. If you look at our core infrastructure, it's the nature of the beast. We get the development. The development takes care of a certain portion of its demand, and then there's those interconnecting pieces. Mm-hmm. So, you'll get a subdivision that happens in a particular area, and then there's surface level roads that need to be improved between point A and point B. So managing those resources and kind of managing that growth so that we're accommodating that, piece. But those roadway sections are sections that a lot of time lag a little bit. So what we have to do is we have to understand where those critical pieces are. We have to figure out how we begin to prioritize what sections get done. And then we have to understand what our financial capabilities are. So we're at the kind of the beginning level of some of that, particularly on the roadway side of it. We've done some initial analysis to look at what the city's bonding capacity would be over a 20-year window. And in some of the more mid-level kind of analysis that we looked at, so we looked at a low, medium, and high kind of scenario in those forecasts.
Right.
The middle scenario would show the city with a bonding capacity of about $1.2 to $1.3 billion over 20 years. If you look at the plans that we have in place and you look at the identified projects today, there's $1.2 billion of identified projects today. Already, right? Okay. And so, okay, well, we have to then begin to figure out those strategies on where to prioritize that. So roadways right now are critical. The water system improvements that are underway right now, there's a lot of improvements that will be completed by the end of 27. So the city's water capacity so the system delivery system pieces that are needed will be in place and operational by early 28, end of 27. The city's water supply will have grown from 25 million gallons per day to 44 million gallons a day by the end of 27. So that piece and that supply piece is, the staff was already working on that, and kudos, they've done an amazing job in pulling that together. The next piece is sewer. Mm-hmm. There's sewer plant expansions that are needed to begin to take that next step there. So, that'll be a priority thing. The important thing about the utility side is it's a separate fund. So a lot of times when we talk about, water and sewer and we talk about streets and parks, we kind of put that all together.
Right.
But they're different funding sources and strategies, which is helpful on that $1.2 billion I talked about. Right. Because that 1.2 would be the stuff that's more the streets and drainage and those sides of it, those facility pieces. So, um, so we're putting that together. One of the things we'll be talking to council about is how do we begin to evaluate what projects take priorities over others.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain purposes behind a given project. Is it public safety? Is it economic development? Is it quality of life? Is it to address a mandate? So there's probably 5 or 6 kind of core things that a project would typically fall into different categories of need or objective, and then we then can evaluate that. So if we say economic development is a top priority above the others, then we would weight our scoring metric to that degree, right? And so that gives us the ability to say, okay, we've got $2 billion worth of projects. We take them through that selection matrix, and then that allows those projects that are the cream of the crop to come to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Then we begin to match what we have in terms of resources to get that done. Is it PAYGO funds? Is it bonds? Is it impact fees? What are those other dollars that we have to make those projects work? You may have your top 5 projects that are just not financially feasible.
Right.
So then we push some of those back down.
Right.
So we say, well, okay, if it's a sewer plant or water or a new police station, what do we need to do first? Well, we got to get sewer done.
Right.
And then we got to get roads done. And then we'll turn our attention to the public safety pieces a little bit later.